New players are still coming to the Pokémon trading card game after all these years, and there are a few things they need to learn before they start playing. Players may think that they can jump right over from the video games, but there are a lot of differences that need to be taken into account. However, once one learns the basics, they can play Pokémon in a whole new way. The Pokémon trading card game has been running for over 2 decades, and it even had 2 video games of its own for the Game Boy Color. The cards were instantly popular, both among those who played the game, as well as kids who just wanted to collect their favorite Pokémon. The TCG has a competitive scene just as active as the Pokémon video games, and it can be just as impressive to watch. With new releases such as the Pokémon TCG's upcoming Silver Tempest expansion coming out on a regular basis, the Pokémon trading card game evolves even more quickly than the video games. One can't approach the TCG the same way that they would a regular Pokémon game. To be fair, it can look intimidating when one is first learning the rules and seeing the game for themselves. However, just like most strategy games, it just takes a bit of practice and research for one to start playing well for themselves. What a deck in the Pokémon trading card game needs? Every player of the Pokémon trading card game needs a deck to play with. Experienced and high-level players will likely build multiple decks, all revolving around different strategies and Pokémon. For a new player though, building one deck is a good starting point, and the best place to start is making sure that one's deck is well constructed, even if it isn't Pokémon TCG's best deck. A Pokémon TCG deck needs to have exactly 60 cards. In addition, a deck can only contain 4 copies of the same card. The only exception to this rule is basic energy cards, which have no limit. There is also a ban list that players have to take into account. Some cards are considered to be so strong that they are banned from tournament play. Any deck that would be used in an official competition cannot use any cards that are banned from the tournament's format. Aside from these restrictions, there are no specific guidelines on how one must build their deck. A player can build a Pokémon deck around their favorite card as long as they don't break the rules. Building a deck in the Pokémon trading card game can be rather complex, but the basic rules are quite easy to follow. The hardest part of deck building is the 60 card limit, so aspiring players will need to carefully count their cards. Once one has practiced putting a deck together, they can begin working on making a proper Pokémon trading card game deck. Basic deck building tips for the Pokémon TCG in the Pokémon video games: the player is encouraged to collect a full party of 6 powerful Pokémon to bring into the endgame. Although the theory does make sense, that means it is not the one that one should be taken when building a deck. The Pokémon trading card game is not about having the biggest and strongest Pokémon, but being able to make the plays required to use them. This is important to remember when creating a Pokémon TCG deck. Basic Pokémon form the base of any deck. While evolved Pokémon are generally a deck's heaviest hitters, the player needs to evolve them from their lower forms first. In addition, too many evolved Pokémon can clog up one's hand, so the player should only have a few evolution lines in their deck. In addition, a good deck should have a couple of different types mixed in order to keep the deck from being too predictable or having a common weakness. However, one should be careful not to throw in too many types, because that could easily lead to the player not being able to find the energy they need for their available Pokémon. Energy and trainer cards round out the deck, and both are vitally important, and the strongest Pokémon TCG decks make great use of both. Energy cards are required for Pokémon to do virtually anything, and trainer cards are the equivalent of Yu-Gi-Oh!'s spell cards. Trainer cards can shape the match in the user's favor, so the player should collect a set of trainers that will give them the advantages they need, such as drawing extra cards or retrieving energy cards. Because of this, trainer cards must be chosen with just as much care as the deck's Pokémon. Other accessories for the Pokémon trading card game. The deck is obviously the most important thing for a Pokémon trading card game player, but there are a couple of other things that a player will need before they start their first match. Thankfully, there are not too many necessary accessories, but they can be more useful than the most expensive Pokémon card. A lot of Pokémon cards require a coin flip to determine their effects, so bringing any sort of coin to a match is a necessity. There are even some Pokémon branded coins that one can use. The player may want some card sleeves and a deck box as well. Card sleeves can protect cards from getting damaged or marked, while a deck box will keep the player's cards in one place. At an event, there is a risk of cards being lost or stolen, so a deck box is invaluable. Another optional accessory is a playmat. A Pokémon TCG playmat can help a player keep their cards in place, although a well-organized player can also replicate the same setup without one. Although most of these accessories are not specifically required aside from a coin, they can be very helpful in keeping the player organized. Even when Pokémon cards lose their value, an organized player can keep a match moving smoothly with minimal issue. Coming to a Pokémon TCG match completely prepared is not only good for the player, but will likely be appreciated by the opponent as well. The Pokémon trading card game requires a bit of setup before one can play, but that doesn't make the game itself any less fun. Once one understands the rules, they can start digging into what the TCG has to offer, collecting cards and using them to construct new decks. The basics of the game are pretty easy to grasp, so the Pokémon trading card game is quality fun for anyone who loves Pokémon.
I'm the strip,